Hello, this video is for CS 237 students and anybody else who's interested. And what I would like to do is go through the workflow for working on notebooks, Jupyter notebooks for assignments. We're going to just look basically at how notebooks are laid out, how you can do basic manipulations, and I'll show you just the minimum that you need to know about entering text and code and running code, some of the resources available. We'll look at a little bit of LaTeX, a little bit of formatting of text, and how to write code and run it, and some of the problems that may come up and how to deal with them. And hopefully this will get you through the first assignment. It'll become second nature after a while, and the notebooks are a really wonderful way to do computing and to explain what you're working on, how to present it, because it's a combination of fairly advanced text processing. You don't have all the capabilities of LaTeX and mathematical typesetting, but you have quite a lot. And then you can run Python. Anything you can do in IPython with Spider or whatever you've been using, idle or whatever. And so I use it for everything now, and I know a lot of people that do that. So I think it'll become second nature, and it will be useful to you in particular data science. It's this is basically the standard way of presenting things when you do data analysis. So you're going to use it. You're going to use it in other classes. Okay, what I'm going to do is share my screen, and we're going to talk through, as I say, the workflow. So here, let me open up the example I have, and this is just it's not the homework, it's an example, but remember that if you're looking at this and haven't yet downloaded, you'll need to download the Anaconda distribution of Python. If you're already been doing this and you want to use VS Code or something like that, that's fine. But I recommend Anaconda. And the first thing you have to do is download the assignment. So if we go to the, let's see here. If we go to 237 and we go to resources, you can download the native file, the IPython notebook file. Sometimes people have problems with this. So if you do have a problem with this, get the zip file and unzip it, and that will generally cure all of these problems. Okay, so you download it, put it in a working directory in your homework folder. Stay organized. It'll help you later on when things get busy. And supposing you have done that, and you have, I call this homeworks. You have your code here, and you can't just click on this here. You have to launch Anaconda, and when you do, it'll open up it'll open up a file browser like this, which will show you all the same files that you had in, it's the same as the file browser on your machine, but it's designed so that now I can indeed click on these, open them. I have two of them open. Let me just use this one. So you have the notebook in front of you. The first thing you should generally do is run all the cells. And let me do that very first thing. The notebook is composed of cells, and the cells are either, and you can see some of the different characteristics here, Markdown cells, where you enter text, LaTeX. It's for exposition, explanation, written answers, or code. Now, these are, you can see that it says it's a Markdown. If I go down here, this is a Markdown. But here's a code cell. Now, the difference is when I click on this, you can see it says code. I can turn something, I can change a cell, okay, from one type to the other. I can add cells, I can cut cells, I can rearrange them. There's a lot of manipulation you do. Basically, this is just a sequence of these cells of these two types. So let me just show you for a moment. If you want to add a cell above where you have selected, you can say insert cell above. The shortcut is just A. You can insert a cell below. The shortcut is B. So I can use the menu here. Another thing I can do is I can just use that shortcut. So here I am selected. Now here's one little issue that might happen. You might be in the middle of something and you decide, oh, I want to add a cell above. Oh, no, I want to add a cell below. No, that doesn't work. You're entering text. You have to be out here on the left of the cell. Okay, click out here. Now you can do these sort of global things, right? I can add a cell above. I can add a cell below. The default is a code cell. And so if you want to change it to a Markdown cell, click on the left. Don't do it here. If I type M there, it enters. Click on the left side. If I say M, look at, see this says code. If I click here, M, it changes it to a Markdown cell. How do I change it back to a code cell? You'd think it would be C, but no, it's Y. Why? I don't know. But Y changes it to a code cell. M changes it to a Markdown cell. So you can go back and forth between the two. You can select a series of cells, okay? If I want to delete, I use the scissors. Here I can select a number of cells here, and you'll figure this out pretty quickly. The file menu, you can save the file. You can do things like rename it or save it, make a copy. You can do all sorts of things, but we don't need to get into most of that right now. So, download the file. If you want to run a cell, okay, that means to display the results. Now, there's, for Markdown cells, there's two basic ways to look at the cell. One is to actually see the rendering of the text formatting that you have created, and that's going to happen when you run the cell. If you double click in the cell, you get the sort of format that, you know, your code, as it were, for doing the text processing. We're going to talk a little bit about some of these things as we go through. But here is a problem, okay? It's in a Markdown cell, and you can see already we have some formatting here. If you want to have a heading, the easiest thing is to use these hash marks. They're the same as the comment character in Python. If you have 3 of them, now I'm going to run the cell. To run the cell, you can go up here and say run. Okay. Let's go back. I tend to use the shortcuts, and as you go along, you will use the shortcuts more. You can see up here there's a number of, you know, run cells, run blah blah blah, different kinds of things. The shortcut here is going to be the, on my machine, it's the command and then carriage return. So I hit command and carriage return, it runs the cell. You can do this for any number of cells. You can select a number of cells and it will do it. So for example, here I've opened up, these are now in the text, you know, entry mode. I could select both of these, for example, and very quickly you will get into using the shortcuts. Command, I'm on a Mac, command, return, and it runs both of them. If you want to run a code cell, same deal. You'll see a number on the left. You can distinguish the code cells because they have this this little addition on the left. This number is the This is the 44th cell, code cell, that you ran. Let me do it again. You'll see. Watch. 45. Let me go down here. 46, 47, 48. Okay. Now, you can also go up here and say run all. And that will go through the entire notebook and run every cell in order. It's almost always, and it'll kind of bump you down, but it's almost always a good idea to do that when you first get the assignment. Now, there's another way to run cells. If you go up here, you see run all, you can run all below. If you're here and you want to run from here downward, you can select run all below. The other thing you really need to, and pay attention, okay, this is really important. I'm going to point out the places where things go wrong and how to fix it. If you just get some weird answer, you're just not sure why this is not working, before you get all involved in a heavy-duty debugging session, go up to here where it says kernel. Now the kernel is the process that's running this, and it stores information. Like if you have a variable, it's Python, right? So it will store a variable name and a value, okay, in a symbol table. And as you compute, it's saving this information in the background. That can screw you up, okay? So if you want to erase it and start over, you go to kernel, okay, and you say restart and run all. You can restart, just restart, which restarts the kernel. You generally go to restart and run all. Just go back and erase everything and start over again. If you've got something going, a process that runs away, it's an infinite loop or something, right? And how do I kill it? You interrupt, okay? And you'll learn other things. You can learn about these. I don't use most of the rest of these. But here it shows you how you can, there's different ways of looking at things. You can fool around with it. Finding and replacing is sort of annoying. It only works in one cell. I don't find that useful. But you'll find your own workflow for all the things you want to do. Okay? So I've summarized that here. Use kernel menu to kill a runaway piece of code and restart and run all and so forth. Okay. Now, this is a Markdown cell which shows the a problem. There's already some formatting here. In many ways, if you just enter text the way you might think of presenting it in a very simple text file, it works fine. You pretty much get something that's understandable. You can add headings here. 3 hash marks. I talked about that a moment ago. Gives you a certain size heading. I'm going to run all here. You can make them smaller. You can make them bigger. So we've done this for you for the assignments. You can change the color, you can change the font, but you'll find out about that later. Another thing is some simple ways to add, to change fonts and to make it a little different. You can let's see, let's say I want to emphasize the word ways. If I put these are based on things that people do anyway in text, almost always, right? So you've seen an email where somebody says they want to emphasize this word ways, and so they put it in stars, right? They put asterisks around it. If you do it here in the Markdown language, it will make it into italics. If you put 2 stars on each side, you have to do it on each side, it will make it into boldface. Okay? Now, in the tutorials directory, I have created a tutorial called the Markdown tutorial, and I go through a lot of different things. And what I tend to do when I haven't done this for a while and I forget about it, and you should do it, is I open these up. Here's a LaTeX tutorial. here is the Markdown tutorial. I tend to keep myself organized by putting everything to the left so I can find it. So here's the assignment. Here's the Markdown tutorial. And if I need to do something, I've forgotten how to do it, then I can just come over here. This will be particularly useful with Latex because you can just cut and paste and make substitutions. So let's just look at a little bit of this. Read through this. You can add, here I've shown you what the text is that you're going to type in, and here's what it looks like when it's rendered. So if you need a carriage return, you put a slash at the end. You know, you can also put 2 blank spaces. Paragraphs, just put a line between them. You can also use HTML, which is hypertext language, if you're familiar with that. If you're not, don't worry about it. If you want to have indented text, you can just hit a tab at the beginning of each one. Here are the headings. Okay. Here's the emphasis I told you about. Italics and boldface are 3 of them. I forgot about that. If you're familiar with HTML, you can add HTML. Markdown is a combination of sort of text-based formatting, HTML, and LaTeX. So lots of things that you can do. Horizontal lines, really don't do that. If you want to have lists or indentation, you can start the line. Let's see what I did here. You start the line with a number and then a period and a space, and it will format it nicely. It'll give you a little bit of indentation. I never use it. Here's what I do. If you were to put if you put stars at the beginning, okay, then it will give you these bullet lists. So it looks like this. You can see I'm showing you here what it looks like here. And if you just put a tab, it'll move it over and indent. You can use lots of HTML if you're into that. If you want to use code to show pre-formatted, use the reverse single quote. And on my machine, it's the upper left corner on a Mac. And that will give you this kind of thing. It's similar to what happens in Piazza. Images, you can put an image in by just dropping it in, into the cell. And that's how I got this. And when you drop it in, it ends up looking like this. And so it's really nice. Images, movies, sounds, you can do lots of things. So take a look at this and put hyperlinks and all these sorts of things. So take a look through that tutorial. Now, let me remove this. Okay, so you've got this problem that you have to solve. And how many ways can you choose a team of 3 women and 2 men from a class with 20 women and 18 men? Now, from 131, you learned about combinations. N choose K. And it comes right out of these kind of problems. You want to choose, out of 20, you want to choose 3 women. Having done that completely separately, we would call that orthogonally, you want to choose 2 men from 18. And so what you're going to do is multiply these 2 because they're independent. So let's get the first answer going. I'm going to double click on this. I'm going to add an A here. This is my solution. Now, I could try to do this with text. I could write something like, 20 choose 3 times 18 choose 2, and if you handed that in, that would be correct. That's fine. However, with a very small change to this, you're going to be able to make it look like real math. But let's look at the LaTeX tutorial. Okay. Now, basic LaTeX is a mathematical typesetting system, and it's really pretty much based on the way you would sort of write it in text. You know, you'll see how it works. But the most important thing to remember is you have to surround the expression which you want to be mathematically typeset in dollar signs. There's two ways to do it. One is, and here you can see, here is what you type and here's what you get. You remember what I'm doing here is I'm showing, I indented this and it doesn't run it. It does it sort of like pre-formatted. There's a tab here. But you can see these are the same thing, but I put it on the left here. If you indent the math, it won't run it. It'll just, you see what happens here. So make sure it's on the left side. If you have simple math expressions like here, if you enclose a math expression in single dollar signs, it will be rendered in line. So here's a single dollar sign, and you can see what it does. Remember, I'm showing you this indented just to show you what's in here, but you really want to put it on the left side here. Don't put a tab before it. And look at this. It does a really nice job of giving you the superscripts. So how would you write this in sort of ASCII text? This is a very standard thing. You've seen this many times in an email message, right? This is the exponent. This is the thing being raised to the 0 power. Plus, minus, you know, all these things are pretty straightforward. And it does a really nice job of typesetting. And if you put text in here, it'll typeset it sort of in this math italics, which works okay, usually. But we'll find other ways of doing that in a minute. Now, if you want display mode, what display mode does is put it on a separate line with the centered. Okay, and the fonts are a little different, and it does things a little differently because it has a little more space. But in that case, put $2 signs around it. So you see what happened here. It's centered in its own paragraph. Now, some of the most, there's all kinds of, it's a very rich system. You can do a lot. And, you know, just Google, you know, to find these things or look them up here. But here are the Greek letters, you know. The typical way that you enter a command or, you know, a function, something that has some effect on the typesetting, is you put a slash in front of it, a backslash in front of it. So alpha is a command which gives you, you can see alpha here, okay, in between the dollar signs, gives you a really nice looking Greek letter. I mean, these are cool, right? Symbols like there exists, for all, implies, right arrow, infinity, I love that, empty set, and so forth, okay? And you just Google these. There's lots of cheat sheets around, or just keep this open. So lots of symbols. Less than or equal to, these should be fairly easy to remember. The membership operator, set membership, is in, not in, you know. Things like greater than and less than, you could write it GT, greater than, or you could just put the symbol in. Here's wedge and V, and, you know, some of the names might not be obvious. Negation, similarity, approximate, and so forth. Plus or minus, just thousands of them. And so doing that, you can write these really nice. Look at this. A intersect B is a subset of D intersect the complement of E. And you can see I did the exponent here. Cap is intersection. What's union? Cup. Cup. And subset EQ, and so forth. Subscripts and superscripts, the whatever this is called, the caret sign, is for superscripts. The only thing you have to remember is that you have to put anything that's considered to be a unit, you have to have delimiters around it. Like you have to do it in an expression, in an arithmetic expression. You know, you put parentheses around it to make sure you do that first. The one thing you want to remember is these curly braces. Okay, so this, just reminding you that how this works. Here you want 2k plus 1 to be superscripted over the 2. Now, if you do this, it's not going to work. What it's going to do is going to say, oh, this is 2 to the 2, and then the rest of the expression is k plus 1. In other words, and it doesn't even matter whether you put a space in there. Watch this. You know, spaces don't really matter inside LaTeX. It ignores them. It makes its own decisions about what the space should be like. So make sure that when you have a superscript, you put the whole thing in this delimiter. Now, one more comment I want to make. You're going to have this happen sometimes. Suppose you do this, but you forget the last one. It's an error. So watch what happens. You get your erroneous entry and it puts it in a box. That's an error. That's not correct. And almost always, now here's the problem. It doesn't give you error messages. It doesn't tell you what's wrong. Almost always, you've left off a delimiter or you've misspelled something. So just make sure that you have the proper nesting, okay? And so here I say, oh gosh, I left this off. I come back and I put it back in. When I run it, it's fixed. That's really the only thing that really causes much confusion for beginners, is that it doesn't give you much help on the errors. So superscripts, look at this. 2 to the x, see, and it goes all the way up like that. To do a subscript, you use the line, the underscore. And you should be familiar with that. This is a fairly typical way that in an email, your math professor will send you an email and say, use this, right? But here it'll be typeset. Now, I should mention that you can do a lot in Piazza. You can typeset math in your posts on Piazza, but there's one difference. You have to do everything with the double dollar signs. You have to put 2 dollar signs around it or it won't do it. But, you know, have at it, you know, when you want to ask a question and make it look really professional, you know, you can typeset your questions. One more thing we're going to talk about is, let's see, how many things? Yeah. There are functions that you can call, essentially. And again, they'll start with this reverse slash, this backward slash. And then there's a name of something, and then it has arguments. Now, the arguments to this function, let me call it that, it's really a macro. You put the curly braces around each one of the arguments. It's not like in a programming language where you have delimiters and then commas. You don't do that. You put delimiters around each argument. So this is something which will make a fraction. It's called frac, right? So frac 1, 2 gives you a formatted 1 over 2. X plus 1, here's another way to do it. Have delimiters, okay? And inside the delimiters, here's an infix expression, an infix operator. Over, I almost always use this because it's so easy to remember. X plus 1 over y minus 1. There it is. And then you can nest them. You know, you can do very complicated kinds of things very easily by nesting. Now, this is a fairly common way of calling functions that do useful things for you. And then there's this other way of doing with infix, which I tend to use more often. It just looks more natural to me. But for example, here's combinations, n choose k, you know, with these braces around it. Because these are all technically called binomial coefficients because they tell you about the coefficients in the binomial expansion, it's called binom. They don't spell it all the way out. So binom nk will give you nk. However, just like the fractions, you can put it inside the delimiters and then use choose. That's a little easier to remember. N choose k. See, it reads perfectly. And then you can nest these, you know, n choose k over 8 choose 3. Just make sure that you have those delimiters around the whole thing, right? And I put double dollar signs, and look, I get this nice thing. This would be the same. You can use the frac and binom. That'll work too. And then there's this pattern works for all kinds of different mathematical expressions, like a sum. You use sum underscore I equals 1 superscript 10. Now, this will work differently in some of these will look different in the inline mode with $1 sign and $2 signs. Watch what happens here. If I do this, which you could put in an ordinary sentence, I use a single dollar sign, and you can see how it's a little more compact. But if I use $2 signs, it puts it in its own, line, centered. And look, this looks a little bit more like what you'd see in a math book, I equals 1 to 10. It formats it a little differently. Same thing for products, unions, lots and lots of ways to do this. So here are floors, square root. Square root gives you a nice, square root sometimes doesn't format too well in a notebook, I've noticed, but square roots, lots and lots, and linear algebra, we won't worry about that. Let me show you one other thing though. I've gone through, and you can just use this for all kinds of things. Look at this. You can do this kind of beautiful, where you line things up. You have to use an environment which has begin the aligned environment, end the aligned environment. You know what? If you have to do this, come in here and cut and paste. And then replace, you can see where var is, and this is. Basically, you have to have these, this symbol right here tells you to line things up. You can do, look at this, one of these really nice typesetting. You can do this, an equation, it'll say f equals, and then you can begin the cases, so there's a nested environment here. Arrays, matrices, all kinds of things. I mean, you can do some really nice things. One more thing. If you want to write text inside an expression like this, it will assume that these are variable names. It'll try to typeset them like variable names. And look, it doesn't look good. Plus, it doesn't get the spacing right. Pieces looks terrible, right? In that case, if you want to put text inside the math, you use this macro or function text and put it inside. Now the spaces in here are rendered. So 3 apples plus 8 pears equals 11 pieces of fruit. And you can see I put it inside here. Okay, so let's go back to the homework. So now we know how to do this. I would say there are, and I'm going to put it in the, well, I could put, let me do this. There are, and I'm going to put in, in line. Let's see. Okay, there are 20, choose 3. Okay, now I want to multiply these two. Well, usually you just put them right next to each other, right? That's pretty straightforward. And then I had 18, choose 2. Okay, let's see if it worked. Yeah, there are 20, choose 3, 18, choose 2. I could have also just said, you don't have to put it in a sentence. I could have done it like this. Okay, I could also, if I wanted to lay it out a little more, I could do this. That's usually what I tend to do. Okay, a little bigger. If I wanted to, maybe do this. If I wanted to put an operator in here, you can put the star to indicate the multiplication. You can do the asterisk, and that's fine. I tend to use a symbol called C dot, which is centered dot, like that. Another one that I really like is, I'll just put it over here, 1 L dots, dot, dot, dot. You'll learn some of these. Okay, now, that's fine. What if I want to calculate it? You can go to Wolfram Alpha. You could do lots of things, but hey, you got Python. So let's add a code cell. And I should probably put this is from a previous assignment, but I will put the math import in here. Here's what I'll do from now on. I'll put import math. I didn't do it in the current assignment. We didn't do it, but let me import the math library. I'm now in a code cell. In the code cells, anything you put here is going to be evaluated, right? It will evaluate each one of them. And the last expression you type, it'll print out as the output. I could also do a print statement. And that'll show up a little differently, not really much. So let's calculate this. In math, you have math choose 20. Now this is Python, so it's a Python choose, right? Oh, it has no attribute choose. What is it? Well, I'll have to look it up. It's okay for me to make, yeah. Okay. So n choose k math Python. It's easy to look these things up. Math comb. Okay. Math comb. Good. You can look up things so easily. I forget these things all the time. There's no shame in it. So it's going to be 20 choose 3, and now I've got to multiply it by math comb 18 2. Oh, good. Okay. Well, there's my answer. So suppose I want to show you what it is here, right? Well, now I just take this. Okay. You want to put a comma in here. Yeah. And then just kill this. I've already imported math, so I don't need to worry about it again. Okay. Let's answer the second one. In how many ways can you arrange the letters in the word Massachusetts? Well, if you remember how to do these kinds of problems from 131, this is a permutation. There's how many letters? 13, I think. 4, wait a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, 13. So if there were no repeated letters, it's a permutation. It'd be 13 factorial. But in fact, because of the repeated letters, right, there's 4 S's. So I need to divide by 4 factorial because these are all the same. They all look the same. And you can permute these letters, if they were individual letters that you could distinguish, 4 factorial ways. But of course, they all look the same. So you got to divide those out. And how many other repeated letters are there? There's 2 T's. What did I say? And yeah, and 2 A's. 2 A's. So the answer is going to be, let's write the answer out. It's going to be 13, and the factorial just is exclamation point. Let me put it in the braces. Oh, over. Now I can just type, because of this formatting, the way I'm going to put this delimiter in here, right? I'm going to do this. I can just keep typing and it will figure it out. Let's see. I have to do 4 factorial, and now I really do want to indicate the multiplication symbol, and you can use the asterisk if you want. 4 factorial times 2 factorial, I know that's just 2, C dot, 2 factorial, and let's see if that worked. Yeah, that works. Okay, now I want to compute that. I think it's math, and this one I think is just factorial. Again, look it up if you don't know what it is. The factorial of 13. Let's see if this is in fact working. Yeah, there we go. But now I have to divide by math factorial 4 times 2 times 2 because, yeah. But of course I have to do this, right? I have to put parentheses around it. Now, factorial, because of the algorithm it uses, will return a floating point number, but we know, of course, it's really an integer. So I'm just going to copy this up here, equals. And let me put some, you don't have to, but I like to make it readable. Let's make sure this looks good. Yeah. And then I cut this out. Okay? So you can make very nice looking mathematics very simply. Okay, let's talk just a little bit. I think there's not as much to say about the Python part, but here I have some imports. I put math in. Let me show you how to use the NumPy random library to do some simple displays. It's not in your assignment, but it's related to it. It's similar to it. I have imported from the NumPy is a high performance library for using arrays instead of lists, and there's a tutorial on it. But basically, from NumPy random, we're going to import seed, randint, and random. Now, random produces a number between 0 and 1, a floating point number. And here's the thing about random numbers that are computed by this library. They're different every time. Watch. If I keep hitting this, look, I keep getting different numbers between 0 and 1. Do it as long as you want. That's sometimes a problem for grading, or you're trying to debug this problem and the answers keep changing. It'll drive you nuts. So it's often a good idea, and we will do it pretty consistently, to use seed. And seed takes a number. I often use 0. Many people use 42 because they're nerds whose idea of literature is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where apparently 42 is the ultimate answer to everything in the universe. It's been a long time since I've read the book. But anyway, you'll see seed 42. Or 0, anything. But the point is that the random number generator gets seeded with a starting value. And every time you run this, it starts in the same place. You can think of a random number generator as generating just a series of random numbers. But when you seed, it starts at the beginning in some place. And you'll always get the same answer. See? So it's a very good idea when doing these sorts of, using these sorts of random functions for producing random numbers to have a seed. Make sure you play with it to make sure it works. But when you're about to submit, go back and put the seed in, and then it's easier for us to grade it. You can use list comprehensions. Go look at my tutorial on Python for 237. Talk a little bit about NumPy, a little bit about various things, but including list comprehensions. I love list comprehensions. Make everything so easy. It's basically a for loop with, that creates a set. So what this says is, call this function as if it were in a loop for k in range size, and size is 10. And what it does is it produces a list of random numbers as if you called this. Now watch, again, it's going to be different every time, unless I put seed in here. And now watch. See, it's the same. So that's often a useful thing to do. You can also call the random function with a parameter, which is the number that you want. So actually, this is even easier. Check this out. Now, it's returning a NumPy array, but that shouldn't matter. If you want to turn it back into a list, Python list, you can put a constructor here. So, okay, let's do, this is a problem. We're going to talk in a week or so about continuous probability. Here's a spinner. The idea is you set, it's like a wheel of fortune or something. You hit it, it goes around and stops. And let's assume that it chooses a real number. Okay, here there'll be floating point, right? So here is a Python function. I'm defining something which is going to plot, okay, which is going to plot some graphs. Again, look at the Python function, the Python for 237, if you're rusty on this stuff. In general, we will give you the formatting, and you can just cut and paste. You know, I do it all the time. But here's the size of the figure. You can have a title, you can have a grid, you know, and so forth. But the most important thing you have to remember about this is you have to list the x values and the y values separately. So we're going to be graphing points or lines on here, and you have to separate the x and y values and give them separate lists. So what do we want to do? We want to choose, this problem has to do with choosing this many number of trials. Trials is typically one random experiment. And we want to choose a random number between 0 and 1 based on this, right? So, and I want to graph them along this line. Well, along this line, the y coordinate's going to be 0, but the x is going to be from 0 to 1. So in here, I'm just going to say random for k in range num trials. Or I can do that. Or I can say random num trials, which is easier. Less typing, fewer mistakes. Now for here, I'm going to add a 0, and here I really don't have a choice, I guess. Well, there's different ways to do it. For 0 for k in range num trials. Trials. Okay. Trials. And when I run this, it chooses, let's see, 50. There are 50 random numbers that got chosen between 0 and 1. Now the seed was set, but if I unseed it, they end up in different places. But before you submit, put the seed back in. Now it's the same every time. Of course, this could be done, now I just realized this could also be done this way in Python with lots of ways you can do this. Okay, the second one is we're going to do as if you're throwing a dart at a square, one on a side, and it lands with equal probability anywhere inside this square. Well, how do you do that? You do the same thing you did here, right? Except you do it twice. It's a pretty simple problem here. Put here, random, random. Let's get the seed out of here and let's try it. Let's see what happens. Run it. There we go. It's going to be different every time. If I put the seed back in, it's the same. Same every time. But it behaves randomly. Okay, so now I've finished my assignment. My strong advice is to restart the kernel and run all. Restart and run all code before you submit. It'll go through and it'll run everything. Check one more time to make sure everything is good. Let's go look at, where's the answer head? Okay, there it is. There's my answer. Looks good. This looks good. Okay, so it gets saved. It does get checkpointed, but make sure you save, okay? And now what I can do is go to, where's Gradescope? I call this, I'm going to log in, What I do typically, I say school credentials, I guess. It figured out that anyway. Maybe I had an account from before. I have my login, my Kerberos password. It logs me in. Of course, I have some instructor courses, but here's my course. Okay, homework 1, drag and drop. Well, I have to go find it. Okay, where is it? Oh, here it is. Okay, good. We're all set. Upload. Close. There's no autograder. If you look, back here, look, sorry. Submitted. I can resubmit. Okay, submission history. Resubmit down here. If I change something. When I was in your position, I was so nervous about not getting things in by the deadline. I would submit, when I had something I thought was correct, I would submit it, and then I'd keep working on it up to the deadline. So anyway, it hasn't been graded, so you can't see the results. You can see your submission history, when you submitted things, and so forth. And that's basically it. Okay, so good luck. Post on Piazza if you have problems, and have fun. Our kind of fun.